All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating analysis of a recent presentation that argues something, well, completely counterintuitive. It's the idea that unconditional generosity can actually become a form of spiritual disobedience. I know, it sounds a bit wild at first, right? We're so used to associating being a good person with just giving unconditionally, but the source material we're looking at today challenges that notion head-on, and it outlines some very specific situations where extending a helping hand is actually the absolute worst thing you can do.
So, the fundamental question we have to ask ourselves, and it's the exact one the Creator poses right out of the gate, is this: should believers always say yes? I mean, we often assume that being a good, compassionate person basically means lacking boundaries. You know, that we should literally always be willing to help. But the source presents this radical, completely countercultural take on the question, based on a very sharp, discerning interpretation of biblical texts. It basically argues that God calls for obedience way above our own emotions or social pressure.
And this brilliantly illustrates the central paradox we're examining today. On one hand, you've got this cultural expectation that pushes for limitless giving, the idea that a good Christian always says yes. But conversely, the source's warning argues that helping the wrong person actually equates to disobedience to God. The core premise here is that God actually calls for strict boundaries to avoid enabling destructive behavior.
To break this all down, here is our agenda for today. We'll start with the generosity paradox, then move to boundaries with exploiters, handling the unrepentant, avoiding divisive influences, and finally, the virtue of boundaries.
Okay, starting right off with section 1, boundaries with exploiters.
Let's look at the manipulator first. The source points out that manipulators don't actually want to fix their problems, Instead, they use these very specific tactics to hijack your resources and basically finance an irresponsible lifestyle. They're absolute experts at playing on your guilt. They'll tell these sad, carefully calculated stories designed specifically to touch your emotions. They play the victim, and crucially, the moment you try to set a boundary, they get incredibly offended. The Creator's main warning here is to never let your generosity be guided by guilt. The Creator anchors this major warning right in the book of John. It's a classic example. After Jesus multiplied the loaves and fish, a huge crowd followed him. But Jesus recognized they weren't actually looking for spiritual guidance. They just wanted the comfort of free bread. The source argues that just as Jesus set boundaries with crowds who were only seeking free resources, you shouldn't allow yourself to be emotionally manipulated by people who just want what you can give them.
Now, what's super interesting here is how the source takes this ancient verse from 2 Thessalonians and applies it directly to modern negligence. The Creator is extremely clear about this. This isn't about the sick, the elderly, or someone genuinely out there struggling to find a job. No, this is targeted at a capable adult refusing jobs so they can, say, stay home and play video games while everyone else pays their bills. If they have the absolute ability to work but actively choose idleness, the source insists you must not subsidize that laziness.
So if we summarize the crucial point of this first section, it's pretty clear. Whether you're dealing with the manipulator or the lazy, the required action is exactly the same: say no and cut off the supply. By refusing to subsidize laziness or manipulation, the source argues you aren't being cruel at all. Rather, you're utilizing a powerful teaching tool. In this framework, hunger and need are actually used to cure laziness and restore a person's sense of dignity and adult responsibility.
Let's move on to section 2, handling the unrepentant.
Here the source tackles a really heavy and honestly often misunderstood topic: how to handle deliberately rebellious behavior. They introduce the striking concept of a spiritual accomplice. It argues that if you cover up a friend's lies at work or if you fund a relative's bad habits, you actually become an accomplice to their behavior. The Creator uses a fantastic metaphor here. By helping them, you're placing a soft cushion exactly where God intends there to be a harsh collision with reality. True biblical love, according to this analysis, just does not enable self-destruction.
So, just impartially reporting on the text here, the explainer outlines this pretty drastic step-by-step biblical protocol found in Matthew 18. It's designed specifically to address someone living in open, unrepentant rebellion. It starts with private correction, then moves to public correction if they refuse to listen. And finally, if they still completely refuse, the instruction is to treat them as an outsider, literally withdrawing the closeness and special support that's typically reserved for members of the community. And the Apostle Paul really doubles down on this in 1 Corinthians. The Creator notes that back in ancient culture, refusing to eat with someone, that was the ultimate sign of rejection. But here is the absolutely vital context. The Creator argues this intentional distancing isn't born of hatred or cruelty, not at all. Rather, it's meant to be a spiritual, therapeutic tool. It's designed to let the unrepentant person fully experience the true isolation and coldness of their actions, hopefully acting as a massive wake-up call to bring them back to repentance.
Transitioning now to Section 3, Avoiding Divisive Influences.
Focusing on those who actively destroy communities through discord, the source defines the divisive person as someone who basically has a dark talent for starting fires wherever they go. There's a very distinct pattern to it. They approach you playing the victim, actively seeking your empathy just to validate their side of the story. But the text strictly warns against helping them. The argument is that if you validate their toxic behavior, you are literally allowing their poison, gossip, and discord to enter your home and your mind.
And the biblical instruction on handling this is incredibly blunt. Looking at Titus 3:10, the steps are literally warn them once, warn them a second time, and then have absolutely nothing to do with them. The source emphasizes a huge distinction here. Notice that the instruction is not try to understand them or put yourself in their shoes. The directive is to step away completely. Division is viewed as the ultimate weapon against peace, and the Creator urges viewers not to compromise their own peace trying to save someone who just wants to watch the world burn.
Similarly, the Creator stresses that protecting the purity of truth is absolutely crucial. Citing 2 John, the argument is that refusing to support those who distort the gospel or promote false doctrines isn't an issue of pride at all. It is an act of absolute faithfulness to the truth. In our modern context, the Creator says this means not buying their books, not funding their ministries, and definitely not giving them a platform, lest you accidentally become an accomplice in the confusion they're spreading.
Finally, we arrive at Section 4. The virtue of boundaries.
Okay, let's bring all these ancient texts into a modern philosophical takeaway. The overarching thesis here really contrasts two totally different mindsets. We so often operate under modern empathy, or we basically accept every demand because we are terrified of causing offense or seeming unloving. But the source argues for biblical mercy. In this view, knowing exactly how to say, "I can't help you," isn't a lack of love. It's actually a protective virtue. Setting firm boundaries and refusing to enable someone's self-destruction prevents you from being unwise with your God-given resources.
The source summarizes this entire hard-hitting argument with one really powerful call to action. Guard your heart, guard your resources, guard your peace. The Creator promises that this type of obedience, setting strict boundaries even when it feels incredibly uncomfortable, actually leads to a purer environment, a much freer mind, and ultimately a far more powerful walk with God.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. How do these ancient boundary rules challenge our modern understanding of empathy and enabling? Regardless of where you stand personally, the framework presented in this explainer really asks us to deeply reevaluate that fine line between helping and harming. Consider how these strict, ancient categorizations of behavior might map onto your own life, especially if you ever struggle with compassion fatigue, guilt, or just establishing healthy boundaries. Because sometimes, as the source boldly claims, the absolute greatest expression of love you can offer someone is a firm no.